Okay, everyone. In lieu of Solomon, I'm going to go ahead and take this over. The information that has been provided to us on the PowerPoint by far, is not my area of expertise, and I'm sure Solomon will be joining us here eventually, but I do not want to take any more time rather than just diving into the materials. So please follow along on the screen. I'm definitely not going to do all the raw administrator stuff, but I do want to recognize that the administrator as being pro-business and good for the SBA. The basics here on this slide is important to note that unlike physical damage type of economic disasters, this is actual economic injury disaster. It's all working capital. It's available to small businesses, agricultural. It's even available to a lot of nonprofits. And that's a difference when it comes to the SBA lending. Most of the time, nonprofits are not going to qualify for our regular type of loans, but in this particular case, they can also apply. You'll notice on the declarations that have been made by the SBA that this is retroactive back to January. And in the process of doing your application and figuring out the amount that you would be eligible for, they went back to January because that's when they believed that the real impact started to hit the United States. Okay, another very important point on this slide is that, we have to recognize, and the SBA does with their lending, that, there are supply chains, that the impact of one business has ripple effects. So the example given on the bottom is a very good example of, because one business may be directly impacted, in a few weeks, another business may also. So the wholesaler and the retailer of the widget product that they're using as an example may be eligible for disaster assistance in addition to the manufacturer. So I think this particular slide speaks to the reality that this is a great assistance program, but it is a loan program. We don't have any grants at this point in time to give out to our business community, and that when you're applying for a loan, there are some criteria that needs to be met. Credit history will be part of the evaluation process here. Applicants must have a particular credit score or history that's going to be acceptable to the SBA. Now, hopefully Solomon does join us because he can talk a little bit more to that. But what I can say from history is that the credit history for an SBA loan is not the same as applying for a bank loan, that there is more wiggle room and more room for explanation than in some other forms of lending. But some minimum criteria does need to be there. That this is a repayment, that part of the application process and the evaluation is to deem whether your business model in the past would be producing enough performance to be able to repay the loan. We understand that today it's not, that's why you're applying. But looking at some of the history and looking at the business model, we should be able to see that the business will produce cash flow in order to make payments back to the SBA. Locality is important to this, and before we know it, the entire country is probably going to receive the declaration that they need, but for right now, we're talking about businesses in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, all counties have been declared. And therefore, when you go to put in your application, you should be able to pull down Pennsylvania and any county in Pennsylvania and go ahead and apply. So this is an interesting point. How much can you borrow? Well, I definitely hope Solomon gets back on here, because this is one of the questions I was hoping to be ask and have answered. Everything we're hearing is that eligible entities may qualify for loans up to $2 million. However, it's important to note that that $2 million is not an automatic, that there is a formula, and I don't know what it is, but there is a formula used to determine how much working capital is necessary to sustain your business through a period of disaster. And $2 million is not going to be the mark for everybody. If your business, doesn't have operating expenses of more than $500,000 in a year, $2 million is not likely to be what you qualify for. But that calculation will be made. Interest rates are very favorable. Interest rates for this particular program, they are setting at 3.75% for small businesses and 2.75% for nonprofit organizations. And yes, we have terms up to 30 years. Does that mean every loan will get 30 years? I do not believe so, but that is one of the benefits of this particular program is the longer amortization periods and therefore the smaller payments. The loan funds themselves, this is all working capital. So, it is not designed to buy fixed assets or expand your business. It is to be used to pay for expenses and operating expenses that are going to be incurred that you need to keep up in order to be ready to roll when the disaster starts to eliminate. Oh, hey, Solomon's here. Sean, do you want to take over host again real quick so you can unmute him?
Hello, this is Solomon. Can you hear me?
Yay.
Oh, boy. Thank you, Melissa. You're doing such a wonderful job. So looks like you're up to describing how much an individual small business can borrow. I think that's where you are. So, what I'll say is that, one of the key points to understand is that the borrow amount is really based on, how the business was performing up through the disaster. And then, one of the documents we're going to ask for is give me a pro forma. And we'll mention that a little bit later. But the idea is that, Melissa was outlining it perfectly. You can qualify up to $2 million. The interest rates are 3.75%. That's fixed. Up to 30 years is your term in terms of repayment. The eligibility piece is, these are working capital loans. I think Melissa was making that point. Everyone can still hear me, right? You can still hear me? Hello?
Yes, I'm getting responses from people that you're being heard.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So, how can I use the funds, right? These are working capital loans that can be used to pay fixed debts, payroll, accounts payable, and other bills that could have been paid had the disaster not occurred. So it's important just to be aware that, a few of the ineligible uses, and I'll just mention a few, are, payment of dividends or bonuses, not eligible. Refinancing long-term debt. Again, this is for working capital. You can't use it to refinance any type of long-term debt. You can't use it to acquire fixed assets. So that becomes very, very important to understand. You're using this to get through this period that has been designated, as a disaster. One other thing, and I get questions on this, is as an owner, can I make a disbursement to myself, which was covering my needs to pay my bills? So the criteria for that is that disbursements to owners are ineligible except when that disbursement is directly related to the performance of services for the benefit of the business. So if you're an owner and you work in the business and you get paid X amount of dollars, $2,000 a month, $3,000 a month, whatever that may be, then you certainly are able to make that disbursement. Am I still coming through loud and clear? I'm paranoid about the sound now. Can you still hear me, Melissa?
Yes,
okay.
Everybody can hear you. You're good. Thanks, Solomon.
Good. All right, wonderful. One other key ineligible use of proceeds would be the payment of any type of federal debt. So the point that we're going to try to, we're certainly going to be making is that if you have federal debt of any type, you should certainly be asking for deferment. Many agencies understand that if there's any type of federal debt, the individual borrowers may need a deferment. So that's something that you should be asking for. As an aside, the normal 7A and 504 programs, 6-month deferments have been approved. So certainly if you have an SBA loan already, you should be asking your lender for deferment if you need that. So that's 7A or 504. But the point is that this particular, borrowings from the economic injury disaster loan cannot be used to service federal debt. The exception would be any type of IRS obligations. What else did I want to say about this? So we mentioned that size, right? You must be a small business. I'll just mention that the example that I'll use is the full-service restaurant industry. That's NAICS code. It's based on a 6-digit code. Your NAICS code 7222511. The gross revenue amount for this size standard is $8 million. So as long as you're below that, you're considered a small business and you would be eligible. Cafeterias, buffets actually have a higher revenue threshold, and that would be NAICS code 7222514, $30 million. So as long as you're below that. And the size standard tables are structured so that 96% of all small businesses in the U.S. all businesses in the U.S. are going to be considered small. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Economic injury disaster loans. What are the collateral requirements? Can you hear me, Melissa? Okay, there we go. Okay, so what are the collateral requirements? So the good news is up to $25,000, there's no collateral that's required. So if you find that, look, I just need a loan to get my business, my limited serve restaurant through the next couple of months, and if $25,000, you can stay below that threshold, there'll be no need to have a discussion about collateral. Once you cross that threshold, then we have to really look at taking collateral on what's available and business assets that are available. When we do take collateral, SBA likes to take real estate as collateral when it's available. The point is that, SBA under these circumstances, they won't decline a loan for lack of collateral. So if you're running a restaurant, you own the building, great. We're going to take a look at the real estate, and the lien position does not matter. So first, second, third, fourth, fifth. We just need to file a lien on it if it's over that $25,000 threshold. The point is that the borrower will be required to pledge what is available. And we see this in circumstances where, small business owners do not own their building. They may have a lease. And again, I would say that if you're in that situation, just go ahead and apply. And once you file your paperwork, there'll be a discussion around what can be collateralized, whatever business assets are available. Okay, I think that's all I want to say about that. Melissa, can you go back to the basics? I just want to mention a few things on what is the criteria for loan approval. There were 3 sections. If you go back the other way, I just want to get this in. What is the criteria for loan approval? If you step back maybe, 2 or 3 slides. Okay, there it is. Stop there. So there's 3 areas, right, that get looked at: credit history, repayment, and eligibility. A couple of the points I just wanted to make about that. So when you apply, when you actually put your application in, a credit bureau report will be obtained on all individuals and businesses, right? And we were really looking for information that's within 6 months. So the headline on this, what I can generally say is that a credit history that may contain, minor isolated incidents of adverse credit is usually not a barrier. So if you're concerned about that, I would say don't worry about it. That's something that is usually not an issue. Now, if you have, major instances of adverse credit, what are those typically? Unpaid judgments would be an example. Repossessions, foreclosures, charge-offs. So in those situations, you're going to be asked to provide an explanation as to where they are and whether or not there's any repayment plan in place that is current. Though that can all be mitigation to the fact that you have a major instance of adverse credit. So even if you're dealing with, some of those major issues, I would say just be prepared to provide an explanation, and you may be able to continue to move forward. Under the umbrella of disaster lending, the one point that I try to make is that medical collections are normally not considered adverse information. So if you're concerned about that, I just wanted to communicate that typically medical collections are not normally considered adverse information. The one full stop that should be mentioned, the thing that could prevent your application from moving forward, is a federal law regarding child support. Anyone that is more than 60 days delinquent on child support, that's basically a no-go. Now, if you can demonstrate that your child support, there's a repayment agreement in place for your child support, and you're current on it, then it's not considered delinquent. So again, that can be a mitigant, a repayment plan that can mitigate that particular policy. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to mention on that page. Let's now turn to, it looks like economic injury disaster loan basics. What kind of small businesses can apply? And really, this is fairly obvious. Examples include hotels, recreational facilities, charter boats, manufacturers, sports vendors, owners of rental property, restaurants, retailers, souvenir shops, travel agencies, and wholesalers. So there's a broad range of businesses that absolutely can apply and that, in fact, will be impacted by this emergency declaration. What other criteria is involved? The applicant business must have a physical presence in the declared disaster area. So in our case, we're talking the state of Pennsylvania. You have to have a physical presence in the state. That's tangible and significant. That's the nomenclature used. But a PO box is not adequate. Does not qualify as a physical presence. Next slide, please. So SBA's economic injury disaster loans, EIDL funds, what we call them for short, come directly from the U.S. Treasury. So you're not going through a bank, you're applying directly with the SBA. The SBA is acting as the bank. It is through SBA's Disaster Assistance Program. We'll have some more additional helpful links at the end of this PowerPoint, but you can go right now to disasterloan.sba.gov. Now, keep in mind the system is overwhelmed right now. There's incredible volume. So there was just some work done by IT, I think, Sunday night to build out some of the capacity. So you have to be patient with the online application part, but once it gets through, it is the absolute best way to go. There's no cost to apply to the program. So there's no cost, there's no borrower fees, etc. The only instance in which we've seen a borrower have to pick up a fee is if the SBA needs what's called a certificate of good standing, and there is a stamp that usually has to go along with that. Typically, it's done at the county level, but there may be a minor charge that is the responsibility of the borrower. But otherwise, there is no cost to apply for this program. there's no obligation to take the loan if it's offered. So the point I make is that the loan application can take up to 21 days, and again, up to 21 days, where as the capacity gets better and the ability to deal with volume, you should see those numbers come down quite a bit. It could take a couple of days once we really get crumbling, but up to 21 days for an up or down decision, approval or disapproval. Then approved another week or so to actually get to disbursement. So, you know, when you put your application, you're going to have 4 weeks to think about it. And so there's no obligation. You can cancel at any time. If you end up borrowing X, but you only need Y, right? You put an application for, and you think you need 100,000, but a month from now the situation has changed. You only need 50. That's not a problem. It's easy to cancel out, the additional 50. So the SBA has made every effort to make this as flexible as possible. And I would say, even if you're declined, you actually have a 6-month window to submit additional information for reconsideration. So again, I think the rules are set up so that you get every opportunity to hopefully get to yes. The maximum unsecured loan amount is $25,000. We mentioned that. And I will say that, there are occasionally we run into small business owners that might have multiple businesses. And they say, well, you know what, I need a $25,000 loan for my limited serve restaurant, and I need a $25,000 loan for, I might have another location, different business, another restaurant somewhere else. They might want another $25,000. If that's the case, if you want multiple loans from multiple businesses, they will get aggregated together. And since 25 and 25 is 50, you're then going to have to collateralize everything. So just be aware of that. By staying at 25 or below, you avoid having to offer up collateral for this disaster loan. Applicants can have an existing SBA disaster loan and still qualify for an economic disaster loan, but the loans cannot be consolidated. So that's just, again, something to be aware of. These economic injury loans are specifically working capital. I think I just saw another memo across my desk, and it just came out that if you have an existing disaster loan, it actually can be deferred through the end of December. And we'll get more information. We'll have that available. But I believe that will be the case. If you're already dealing with a disaster loan, you can get a deferment on that. In fact, they're going to be automatically deferred to the end of this year. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so basic filing requirements. So there are essentially 2 ways that you can submit an application. One is going to be online, and of course that's going to be much more efficient and effective. And I say that the caveat to that, of course, is that the system is being overwhelmed. The other alternative is to do it the old-fashioned way: download all of the forms, complete the forms, and then mail the forms in. What I typically recommend is that if you go online to SBA Disaster Assistance, there should be a link to loan forms. And I don't know, Melissa, if you have the ability to do that, but the website has a section where you can download these forms. There's about 5 or 6 different forms, and I want to maybe step a little bit through those right now, just so you know. So what's the first thing? Complete the SBA loan application. It's a Form 5 or 5C for sole proprietorship. So just be mindful that there are 2 different forms, one for sole props and the other one for regular business. It's a standard application. It's going to ask for your, the name of the business, the organization type, what are the best ways to contact you. It's going to look at the name of the legal name of the owners. So that's all that's going to be completed on Form 5. The tax information authorization, you've seen this before. This just gives the authority to the SBA to pull your transcripts. They're going to look at the last 3 years. And that's going to be another one of the forms. You'll need 3 years of federal tax returns to submit. Next bullet point, complete copies of the most recent. It says the most recent there, but I'm saying you're going to need the most recent 3, right? If you don't have 2019 done yet, just provide a financial statement or current year to date. So you would have, the way that would work, you would have 2017, 2018. You may not have 2019 completed yet. Put together a financial statement, the income statement, balance sheet, cash flow, and have that available. And you can submit that. And then there's the personal, schedule of liability. That's Form 2202. Let me just spend a minute on that. So this is the schedule that the SBA is going to use to evaluate what type of debt do you have. So again, this is a standard form that looks at the name of the creditor, the original amount, the original date, current balance. Is it current or delinquent? What's the maturity date? So this becomes important because we need to understand what your debt service, what's your total debt service, what's your total debt load, and those are all things that are going to get either calculated into or excluded from the amount that will be ultimately determined to as far as what your ultimate loan amount. So hopefully that's clear. But that's a schedule of liability. That's a Form 2202. Again, you can download the PDF, but when you go online, there'll be space, there'll be record or fields in which you can fill in this information. And then finally, the personal financial statement, SBA Form 413. That's like a balance sheet for individuals, right? Just has your name, address, and it will take a look at your assets, your liabilities, and then your net worth. That becomes important because typically you're going to have to provide a guarantee on these loans. So we need to look at your personal financial situation. What type of access to credit do you have? What type of resources do you have? All that gets factored into making a decision. I will say the one question we get on the Form 413 is, do I have to include my spouse? And the answer is yes. You have to include the assets of the owner's spouse, has to be put on this form. And any owner that is a 20% or more of the equity of the applicant. So all 20% owners have to fill out this form, SBA Form 413. And it just says at the bottom, paper application is acceptable, but we definitely encourage you to do an electronic filing. Okay, let's go to the next page. Additional filing requirements. Okay, what else is needed? Other information that may be requested. A complete copy, including all schedules of the most recent federal income tax return. I think I had mentioned that again, 3 years. Typically, it should be, if everything was in a perfect world, 17, 18, and 19. You'll need those tax returns. If the most recent tax return has not been filed, a year-end profit and loss statement and balance sheet for the tax year can substitute. And what's the next thing that you need? A current year-to-date profit and loss statement. Right? We need to see exactly where you are in terms of your performance of the small business. And here's one that it probably is not clear enough, but I'll mention it. The additional refiling requirement of an SBA Form 1368. It provides monthly sales figures. So if you haven't pulled the form, it's 2 pages. You don't have to use this form, but we just need the information. So on the first page of this Form 1368 is a chart that looks at monthly sales figures. That is the way in which the analyst is trying to look at your seasonality. So you'll see a chart that has a month, and you'll run your months from January through December, and we'll look at your revenue for the past 3 years and to determine what the seasonality looked like. The second page would have what we're calling a pro forma or forecast. And this is the part that's not clear. The instructions could be better on this. And I'm assuming it's part of the online system. But what we want to do is understand what your current forecast looks like. This is an income statement, income and expenses for the business, what they will be during the period affected by the disaster until normal operations resume. And people say, well, how can I predict that, right? It could be for the next month, could be for the next 2 months. What I would recommend is that you do a forecast that captures the next 6 to 12 months. So even if you did, for your income statement, you could roll it out with your month, month 1 through month 12, starting in March. It would run from April to April. And so you could do a forecast and say, okay, this is what's going to happen to my revenue, or this is what is happening to my revenue as a result of this crisis. My revenue was normally, $250,000. Now it's more in the neighborhood of 100. So that would be your forecast. And so you would roll that out, because those numbers, that forecast, when compared to your history, right, is the way that the loan specialist is going to determine, what the gap is in your working capital. Hopefully that's coming across clear. So those are kind of the two pieces that they use to figure out how much of a loan you can afford and how much, what's the gap in your working capital. I was at 250, now I'm at 100. I've got $150,000 working capital on a gap on an annual basis. I've got to, where's that going to come from? And that's where the loan comes in to help supplement that and get you back up to where you would normally be. So again, hopefully that's clear. You don't have to use the SBA Form 1368. You can pull all that information together on an Excel spreadsheet. That's fine, but the form is more there for convenience. Okay. Let's see. Do I want to say anything else? Let's just. I don't have anything else to say. We may get some more questions on that, but that's it on that. Let's go to the next slide. So we had mentioned this, private nonprofit organizations. So again, we identified some examples: nursing homes, food kitchens, museums, educational facilities, etc. We say private because government entities, municipalities, which typically are nonprofits, are not eligible for disaster assistance. So the paragraph below just looks at the official definition of a nonprofit. But a nonprofit would be, I think I saw a question come through, what are the requirements for a nonprofit? They're the same. The interest rate is a point lower, 2.75% is the interest rate. You're still going to be requested to submit financials, and even though there'll be a different format, but there still has to be a determination as to what the gap is in working capital and what can the applicant business afford in terms of repayment, and the goal is to not stress the business in terms of cash flow. So that's why you're eligible for up to 30 years. And, I'll say that in the work that I did for Hurricane Irma and Hurricane Maria in Florida, there's no guarantee on what type of term you get, but certainly you can communicate, what type of term you think you need. We saw a lot of 30-year terms there, and, that translates into, $50, $60, $70 payments per month. So the goal of the program is to help American business recover, and if we can make that happen and make that, take the stress and strain out of your cash flow, certainly you want to do that. So I would say in your paperwork that you submit, especially if you submit an Excel schedule, you can say, look, this is what I need. I need a 20-year payback. I need a 30-year payback. And, certainly the analysts will look at that. Okay, enough about private nonprofits. We may get some more questions on that, but let's go to the next slide. Ineligible entities. I kind of talked a little bit about this. So, not to be confused. So what are some of the ineligible entities? Agricultural enterprise. This is really related direct farm production. Primary activity is farming. not eligible. There are a slew of disaster assistance programs under USDA and the Farm Service Agency, and those folks are the experts, so we allow them to handle that. So if you if you happen to have a farming enterprise, then I would end up connecting you with USDA and or Farm Service Agency. They can speak to some of those programs. Religious organizations, charitable organizations, gambling concerns, casinos and racetracks, real estate developers, all not eligible entities under disaster assistance, under the economic injury disaster loan. Okay, next slide. So how do you apply? So again, we had mentioned applicants may apply online using the electronic loan application. There's a link there. I assume this is going to be shared with everyone. So I would, again, encourage you to go there, start the process. If you find that you get bogged down, then there is a link on the landing page. I don't know, Melissa, are you able to flip over to that? disasterloan.sba.gov. You can take a look at it.
I'll get there for you.
Okay, if you can. So on that landing page is the link to apply online. You have to go on and get your user ID and password, but you can apply online. There's another link called Loan Information, in which all the forms that I just talked about are available as PDFs, and you can download them. You can fill them out by hand if you like. You can mail them in, but again, I would say you could print the forms out just so that you know what information is going to get requested. That makes it convenient when you're going through the application process. And if you choose to, you can, like I said, you can mail them in. Make sure that you put a tracker on it if you go with USPS or FedEx or UPS to our processing center. And that's a processing and disbursement center in Kingsport Road, Fort Worth, Texas. And that address is listed there. So the organization can take paper applications. Okay, looks like I see the Disaster Loan Assistance website. If you go to loan information, top right-hand corner in blue text, this is where I just stepped through all the forms that would be needed. I just want to show you where those forms are.
It's very slow, Solomon.
If it comes up, okay. Okay. Yeah, of course. So, of course, the tech folks are saying if you're able to go on at night between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m., that would be the time to do it. The volume is lower then. Of course, service not available. Okay.
So just for everybody's information, sorry, Solomon, just for everybody's information, the Chamber and CREDIC's landing page for virus disaster related stuff is right here at harrisburgregionalchamber.org/coronavirus. And in the left-hand column, there is the SBA Disaster Assistance with a link to the online application information, which is exactly where Solomon is talking. And even though it's a little slow to load, it will get you there when it's ready to roll.
Yeah. And then I guess with that third bullet point in our PowerPoint, there's just a customer service number. And any specific questions about your loan application, first direct them to the customer service. There's an email there also. But certainly if you're not getting a response, let me know. I think Melissa has my email. You're welcome to share that with everyone. If anyone is getting bogged down, or if you have anyone that's particularly frustrated, I know it's a challenge, like I said, given all of the volume that's on these websites now. There's assistance that is available through our SBDC network. So the SBA's, one of their official resource partners are the Small Business Development Centers. There are 16 centers in the state of Pennsylvania. There are SBDCs located throughout the country, but SBDCs, along with SCORE and Women's Business Centers, are all helping out individual businesses that might need assistance. in putting together financials or putting together a forecast. So we encourage you to use the link that's listed in the PowerPoint to identify an SBDC that is near you. For our area, it's really, for the Dauphin County area, it would be Kutztown SBDC. And in fact, Martin, he'll probably curse me for mentioning his name, but Martin Brill may be getting involved. We'll see, but he's a consultant that's there. But we use that website or that link to go there and identify someone that can help you put together those projections if you need support around that. And so finally, I think this is the last slide. So what we're saying is, with submitting your application, I would encourage everyone to submit, even if you have doubt, you're not sure whether or not you're going to need the money. I encourage you to submit. The deadline, the application filing deadline, is December 21st, 2020. It's typically 9 months after the disaster is declared. So you have until December 21st, 2020. And that's it. So if you have any questions, we can certainly go through those now.
All right. Well, there were a lot of questions that came through. Thank you, everybody, for your participation and mostly for your patience. Definitely, things are slow all around. Every conference call I've been on, I've had trouble getting into. It's just the nature of the beast right now. So thank you for your patience and your grace. One of the first questions we got, Solomon, is about personal guarantees. Being that, one of the documents you are requiring is essentially a personal financial statement, did we hear you say that personal guarantees are going to be required?
Correct.
And then the next question is if a pledge of available collateral is going to be required, does that flow through to personal assets other than business assets? And is there a way to shelter personal assets?
Well, with disaster loans, right, they're typically, we're trying to get to 100% of the value of the loan. So the idea is that a guarantee is going to be requested. If collateral is insufficient, then yes, they're going to be looking to the owners to provide a guarantee, a secured guarantee, and that means looking at equity in a home. So that's part of the process, and that's the reason why we use the Form 413.
So another question has to do with timing. Outside of the fact that we know that online is slow right now, how long does it take to get an approval or a decline? And once you're approved, how long does it take to get your money?
Yes, good question. So the response that I have is it's up to 21 days, even though we've seen once we've got to get up and running. I saw that in Irma and Maria, 3-4 days in some cases. But again, that's kind of once these centers get up and running. I would say up to 21 days for an approval or disapproval. If it's approved, then it'll take at least another week or two to get to disbursement. So we're talking, this is a 4 to 5 week endeavor.
Okay.
If things hold, if our estimates hold true. Yes.
So another question is kind of related to that. There has been some talk out there or concern about changing the process because of how overloaded you guys may become. And one of the questions that came through is that who is actually facilitating these applications, at least for now, versus what they may choose to change later? Is this going to be facilitated through an outlet of banks and CDFIs, or is this going to be facilitated simply with the SBA?
Yeah, this is typically done through the SBA. The SBA will expand or contract their workforce as necessary to be able to handle processing of loans. They certainly use some of the loan processing centers that already exist. They use personnel in Sacramento. They use personnel in Birmingham, Alabama. So at this point, the SBA will use the existing human resources to process these loans.
Okay.
And these are typically all the individuals that work for SBA right now.
Okay. Thank you, Solomon. Back to the question of personal guarantees. What about for nonprofits? If if there's an eligible nonprofit out there that gets approved, are personal
Mm-hmm.
guarantees required there?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's not as clear. I would say we'll make that a follow-up item. I'll find out. My understanding is that personal guarantees will be required, but I get it in a nonprofit environment. That might, that might have to get discussed. So put that down as an item I will follow up on.
Sure. Another question came through. I guess if you own a company or operating it, you're basically self-employed, but there are those kinds of self-employed individuals that are, as a sole prop, like a real estate agent, or they might work on contract and not get paid as an employee.
Mm-hmm.
What about those kinds of self-employed individuals?
You're self-employed, but they're still at least a sole prop, right? So it sounds like they're working for themselves.
Right.
They have a business. Yeah. And if you're injured as a result of this downturn, then certainly you'd be eligible, whether you're directly impacted or indirectly. There's no exclusions other than the ineligible businesses we identified, and as long as you're not in that space, then you could potentially be eligible. If the person said they're involved in real estate, but they're like a broker,
right?
I don't know if we have enough an agent. Yeah, so agents are you're running a business and you're a real estate agent. So my answer is going to be yes, you'd probably be eligible.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So back to some of the website problems that we've been experiencing. And it just is what it is. We understand that. But as far as uploading documentation, I have one example of somebody that applied last week and felt that their application was completed, but yet the
Mm-hmm.
upload of the information didn't go through. What do they do now?
So I did speak to someone earlier today, and yeah, they had the same problem. The information did not go through, so you can either continue to try to upload, or you could. The other alternative is to send hard copies in, and I usually send a note. You could send a note into the disaster assistance indicating that you're having the problem, that this is what you intend to do, and you put your name and contact information in that email, and then you could follow up with hard copies. Again, I'm not going to have a great answer for you on the technical side. I know that we've got IT folks working on that, on trying to fix that. I'm hoping that it'll continue to get better day in and day out, but that's always an alternative. FedExing a package to Texas probably only takes a day and a half, 2 days, tops.
Okay. So let's talk about this formula there is to determine how much it can actually be requested or how much can be approved. There's the specific question that's in front of me is if somebody
Mm-hmm.
makes a request for a certain dollar amount, but you guys run it through your system, you're like, no, that's more than what would apply for this amount of working capital, or based on the pro forma, it doesn't match. Does that mean the loan's just declined, or do you offer, say, well, we can't do that, but we can do this amount?
Yeah, I think that, again, the loan specialist is evaluating all of the facts that the borrower is providing, right? So it's, again, 3 years of tax returns. You should have a monthly view on that 1368. You're going to see your revenue by month. So you've given them information to determine seasonality. You should have a current year-to-date sales flow and income statement, and then you're putting your forecast in, right? So all of that will be used, and certainly if the borrower feels the dollar amount is not sufficient, he or she should communicate that to the loan specialist that they're working with. They will be in contact with you, and if there's any follow-up questions or concerns, certainly you have the ability to communicate with that individual.
Is there an actual published formula on how the loan amount is determined?
I don't have a published formula. No, I don't have a formula. I can take that as a question to see if there is, but again, it's what I've been told and what's been communicated to me is that, again, they're looking at, historically what your working capital needs, what do your performance numbers look like, and as a result of this disaster, what has happened. And so you can illustrate that, a small business owner can illustrate that in their projections. And then the difference between those is how the analyst or specialist is trying to come up with a loan number that you can support.
Okay, thank you, Solomon. Only a few more questions really that I want to try to get through, and I know we're running over 2, but that's because of technical difficulties. So let's try to get through these and then wrap this up for everybody. Please remember this is being recorded and will be edited to remove the delays. It will be available to listen to and to look through later. So please direct people to that recording when we have it up. And as far as the PowerPoint presentation, I don't have Solomon's permission to share the PowerPoint yet, but I'm pretty sure this is an official PowerPoint, so you're okay sharing it with those attendees today, correct?
Yes.
Good, beautiful.
Okay.
Okay. So one of the questions we received has to do with this idea of hello? Hello? Solomon? Hello? Okay, somebody can hear me now, but we lost Solomon again. All right, this is what I'd like to do, everybody. I only had about 4 or 5 more questions that did not get addressed. I will make sure that that information, those questions are answered and that we post them somehow or get back to you directly. Your questions were very important and very good. So I'm going to cut it off now and say thank you for your participation. This was definitely an experiment. We are your open pathway to getting all questions answered. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us. I can be found on our website, and Sean can be found on our website. We will get answers for you. Just shoot them at us. In the meantime, I know this is a trying time for everybody, and we need to remember that this is a health crisis before it became an economic crisis.